cannot be it for the rest of my life. I remember that thought burning this hole in my brain that I couldn't ignore, because 5 years ago I was standing in the kitchen, and that kitchen was belonged to my client, and I had camera gear hanging off both of my shoulders, about to start a 14-hour day, and I was in absolute fucking agony. And I remember having this visceral thought. I was gripping onto a chair and I was like, this can't be it for the rest of my life. And that thought came out of nowhere, but to give you context, it didn't really come out of nowhere. A few days before this, right, so the wedding was on a Friday, and the Tuesday just before, like a couple of days before, I'd had major surgery to remove 3 cysts and my gallbladder. Tuesday was that operation, and the wedding was Friday. And I was standing in that kitchen, pretending that I wasn't in as much pain as I was, getting through the day. And I remember it because that thought, and the reason I say it burnt a hole through my brain, is because it unraveled something for me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but this was the moment that changed everything. Up until that point, I had built a business from scratch. Built it from a little, or maybe like probably a lot more fuck you energy than I realized. And we'll get into that later in a couple of episodes, right? Next. But like, I was proud of what I built. I had incredible clients. I was turning well over 6 figures per year. And I'll never say that I had made it, but I had built it literally from scratch to an incredible spot. And that day, that single fucking thought cracked me open. And I realize now that for the first time in a long time, it was because I was actually really honest with myself. And following on from that, because of that honesty, I couldn't ignore the feeling that I had built a life that looked right, but for me felt completely and utterly wrong. And if you've ever had one of those moments where everything in your life looks good on paper, people might even be telling you, like, fucking hell that you've made it, or they see the success that you have, and maybe you are growing, like your business or your life is growing and you're reaching your potential. Maybe you're earning more money than you ever had. Maybe everyone around you thinks that you're living the fucking dream, but inside for you is a different reality, because inside for you something feels off, and not in this like massive, dramatic, like life is just, I don't even know how to put it in a word, like not in a dramatic way, but like subtly. You wake up feeling tired and you don't really know why, and your head has a million thoughts running through it every single day, but for some reason you can't land on one, and you're carrying this sense of heaviness that you can't explain. And maybe you keep telling yourself that actually when I get this done, or when I do this, when I get that clarity, or when this finally happens, then maybe I'll feel better. Maybe if I just take some time off, that might help, but it doesn't. So if that's you, this podcast is for you, and it's for the people who've built something enough to realize that success can still feel surprisingly empty because you've built it disconnected from yourself. And for me, that day in the kitchen was that moment. I didn't realize it and pinpointed that in that exact moment at the time, but I realized that what I was building was keeping me disconnected from myself. But that day in the kitchen, right, didn't come out of nowhere. When I look back and track back in hindsight, it was this moment I stopped pretending. But if I'm really honest with you, those signals had been there for a very long time. I had just become incredibly good at giving like logical, rational explanations and pushing them the fuck down, right? And I want to talk through some of the signals that came up for me when I look back, because they started small, and you might recognize some of yourself in some of my signals. So the first one was this dread, right? A couple of days before a wedding, or a shoot, I would feel this knot in my stomach where I'd say it was like anxiety or I was nervous, and I would always say, well, it's just because I really fucking care, and if I didn't care, then I wouldn't be nervous. And that became the night before. So that would happen the night before. I'd have these mad dreams, I'd get like this pang of anxiety, but that then started to kind of roll out and overflow into every morning. Right, my alarm would go off, and before I'd ever fucking touch the floor, there'd be this weight sitting on my chest. I'd lie there trying to like negotiate with myself, right? Come on, you're fucking lucky. People would kill for this. You would kill for this. A prior version of you, this is where they wanted to be. Like, pressure is what makes diamonds. You've got clients waiting. Like, get up, come on, because be grateful. And I did, right? I never missed a job. I don't think I ever cancelled. I showed up diligently all the time. And every day I felt like I was dragging myself towards a life that I was supposed to want, but for some reason just didn't excite me anymore. It didn't feel like I was myself in it anymore. And because I had believed at that point so much in mindset, and I believed, and I still do to today, believe that our thoughts shape our reality. Every morning I tried to change my thoughts. I would take a piece of paper and I would list everything that I was or should be grateful of, right? Healthy family, successful business, amazing couples, amazing clients, people trusting me. And I would make this list. And it's not that that list wasn't true, right? I journal and I'd meditate and I'd repeat all of the things that I needed to. I try and force my body to feel what my brain knew that I should feel. And sometimes it worked. But then the heaviness would come back. And I just assumed it because I wasn't grateful enough or I wasn't positive enough and I needed to work harder on my mindset. But what I understand now is that you can't gratitude your way out of a life that is no longer feeling aligned to who you have become and who you want to become, like where you want to go. Because what I am saying is gratitude is incredibly powerful, but gratitude isn't supposed to become a way of silencing or getting you to gaslight yourself on your own truth. And that's where the honesty came in. Signal number 2 was sleep. When I think back to that time, sleep, the nights were the worst, right? Because I would feel like I'd be going to bed and I'd be exhausted and I'd be like, fucking hell, I'm going to get a good night's sleep. And I would be so certain that I would fall asleep instantaneously. But as soon as I hit the pillow, as soon as my head lay down, it was like my brain had taken this shot of adrenaline and it was wide awake, right? I would see 10 o'clock, I would see 11 o'clock, I would see midnight, I would see 1 a.m., I would see 2 a.m. If I did get to sleep, I would wake at 2 or 3 and I would be up until 5 or 6. And it was this cycle of if I did get to sleep, I would wake up. If I couldn't get to sleep, then it would be really late before I actually went to sleep. And my mind would race constantly while I was awake, right? Through to-do lists, timelines. Did I charge every battery? What if things change? Did I back up this? Did I do that? Did I send that invoice? Will I forget that lens? Did I need to do X, Y, and Z? What if I disappoint someone? And then it would move into like money, right? Then the business, then the future, then my relationships, then somehow these conversations I'd had with someone like fucking months ago. But there was never silence. I never got to a point where my head hit the pillow and was like, silence, peace, right? And at the time I was just like, maybe this is just the price of the game. Maybe this is just the way it's meant to be an entrepreneur, to run your own business, that like you never can switch off, and that this is what I signed up for, technically speaking. And I thought maybe I'm wired like that as well. Like I'm a night owl. I've always had a really busy brain. I normalized it all, and I think the line that got me the most was, this is probably what it's meant to feel like. I took on this as a risk. I took on this as a stress. What I realized now is my nervous system had forgotten what peace and ease and safety felt like. And my body never really believed that the workday had ended, so it never switched off. And I had gotten used to that. So much so that that became my familiar. And as a result of that, I think signal number 3 came in fucking thick and fast. And I think this was the straw that broke the camel's back, but that's a podcast for another day. But signal number 3 was what was happening in my body, right? Looking back now, I can see that it was absolutely fundamentally screaming, right? My shoulders lived up near my ears all the time. My jaw was permanently tight. I was always clenching. I would always have to go like this, like I'd always have to like stretch my teeth, stretch my jaw. I realized I said stretch my teeth there, forgive me. But stretch my jaw, right? Like because I was grinding my teeth so much. My neck was always this like pain. I'd always have to roll my shoulders. My back always hurt, but it was always like shoulders and neck. And I had these constant headaches, right? So because of all of that, I felt like I was always exhausted. And I never felt that I could ever really fully relax. Even if I did take some time off, or even if I did go on holidays, or even if I did just take some space, I would still feel like my fucking shoulders were in my ears. I would still feel stressed. And even if I was like, I don't even know how to say it, like sitting on the beach, I was like always still going, when is the penny going to drop? And for all of that tension, for all of what was happening inside my body, for all of the aches and pains and all those things, I genuinely just blame photography, like an occupational hazard of like carrying around heavy cameras, long wedding days, like hours on my feet, like ducking and diving into different places, moving my body and molding it into weird spaces, driving across the country, staying up late, all of that, right? And like that's logical. But when I took time away from work, right, whether it was for time off or whatever, nothing changed to that tension. The tension stayed, the anxiety stayed, because I didn't know how to actually soften anymore. I didn't know how to actually, don't even want to say the words relax anymore. I didn't even know how to just feel like I could exhale anymore, is the easiest way to describe it. So for me, I stopped asking the question. Well, I stopped accepting that it might be aches and pains and tension from like photography, and asked, what am I actually carrying still, even though I've put my cameras down? So, in some senses, I was very aware of the signals. I was very aware of what was happening. I was very aware of how my mind was, how my body was. I was very aware of all those things. And I was paying very close attention to them. But I think for me, I just kept finding these like perfect, reasonable explanations for every single one of them. I was able to justify every single one of them. And the dread was because I cared. The lack of being able to sleep or waking up from my sleep was because just again I cared, or I was creative, or maybe that was a time where I could actually just be with my thoughts or whatever. And all that tension was because photography was physical, right? Every single explanation or justification that I had sounded logical and made a lot of sense, until all of them actually at one point stopped making any sense. And I think that brings me back to that kitchen, to that moment, to that thought, to the this cannot be like this for the rest of my life. Because in a situation where most people would have stayed at home and prioritized recovery, I didn't. Because at the time when I look back, like part of me is that that's who I was. Like I was reliable, I was committed, it was somebody's wedding day, like there was no way in hell that I could cancel on them, there was no way in hell that I couldn't show up. I was always professional, the clients always came first, like, and I put it down to like this is just how it always needs to be, because that's the way business gets built. But my body underhand was screaming, right? And I just remember that day where I was like lifting the camera, trying to move around the place and feeling the pain, right? Standing hurt, walking hurt, moving hurt, holding the weight of the cameras hurt, everything hurt. And that to me was like that catalyst moment that gave me clarity of like, it can't be like this. I had realized in that moment that the life that I had built couldn't actually prioritize my life. Like I was there, I was smiling, I was doing my job, I was delivering exactly what they paid for, and I genuinely would not come out of that wedding knowing that I hadn't given everything that I possibly could. But I realized that I was giving everything I possibly could to every single thing other than myself. So that's the clarity that came from that moment was I have just built a life, I've built a business that doesn't allow me to prioritize me, or even the business itself could, but I wasn't allowing me. And so for the first time in my life, when I had that thought of like, this can't be like this for the rest of my life, I didn't argue with that thought. I didn't try and justify it or explain it away or push it down. I didn't tell myself not to feel it. I actually let it exist. And one of the reasons why I call this podcast Permission to Live is because that's exactly what I needed. When I look back now, I needed permission. I needed someone to tell me that the signals weren't something to ignore, they weren't weakness, they weren't something that was wrong with me. That permanently living in a constant state of stress and survival isn't what success is supposed to be about. That success isn't supposed to cost you your life, your relationship with yourself, your connection with yourself and your life, and that you're allowed to change direction without your life falling apart. that wedding was in 2021, and sitting here 5 years later feeling completely different inside and outside of my work. So I feel different, like a completely different human being on the inside. So if there's one thing that I hope that you take away today from this episode, is that the signals that you've been trying to silence or pushing down or not listening to might actually be invitations. The exhaustion, the restlessness, the feeling that something isn't right, quite right, right? Even though you're probably telling yourself you should just be grateful. None of these are actually problems to fix. All of these signals are actually pointing you home. And maybe, just maybe, right? Maybe you don't need permission from anybody else. The only thing right now that you need to do is to stop talking yourself out of what you already know. And when I think about permission to live, that's where we're going with this. That's what we're doing. That's what we're here for.